Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ogos, and it seems that I'm a bit scary because everyone is at the back and not coming front rows. But anyway, I won't be that scary. I promise you. I'm from the Maldives. When you hear about Maldives, or when you hear the name Maldives, what does actually come to your mind?
Beach.
Beach? Yes. Well, yes. One of the things that we are famous for is that we are a world-class tourism destination, and I guess that's what everyone knows us as a world-class tourism destination. And it is a world-class tourism destination with over 100 islands as tourist resorts. So that's a lot of tourist resorts by our standards. And currently, the current government is working on to open additional 50 resorts in the next 3 years term. So that's a lot. And we have the world's largest underwater restaurant. We have the world's largest seaplane fleet. So that's, and also I guess we are going to be per capita the highest number of airports in the near future. So that's a lot of things that we are achieving through our actual tourism industry. But what do we actually know about Maldives? Or what do you know about Maldives? First of all, where are we in the world? I guess most of you would actually know where we are located. It's just south of India. So if you look at the map, that's where we are. It's a group of dots on the world map. Fortunately for us, now on every world map we are there. There was a time in I think as late as 1960s, on some world maps the dots were not there. But we are there now on all maps. And if you look at an enlarged photo of that, that's where we are. That's the map of Maldives. Now, you may wonder, those green areas, those are not land masses. Those are atolls, atoll formations. Those are not land masses. If we enlarge that further, one atoll, if you look at those, actually even those green ones are not. The yellow dots are the land masses. So that's an island. And if you want to see further, that's our capital city. That's our capital city. It's 1 square kilometers. It's fully packed. And that's our largest international airport. One island, one airport. And the airport, actually, the runway runs from one end to the other. If you are coming into the Maldives, first time flying into the Maldives, you will feel as if that you're going to land on the sea. Before touchdown, you don't see anything else sea, and then you touch down. So that's us in terms of the Maldives. Now, this actually creates a lot of challenges for us. So that's what I'm going to talk about here. In terms of providing higher education to a country such as this, what are the sort of things? I know when the conference was introduced, he talked about OERs. I'm not going to go into the technicals of OERs and all that, but generally, what are the challenges that we are facing in terms of providing higher education, and what role does open and distance learning play in that expansion? We are talking about 1,200 islands, those tiny islands, 1,200 islands spread across a length of 820 kilometers and 130 kilometers wide. So from one end to the other, and it's a very large, vast area that we have, and each island itself, with, of course, you did mention beaches and all that, small communities and smaller populations. Of these 1,200 islands, we have 196 inhabited islands. And then, as I mentioned before, around 100 resort islands and another 50 coming up, so a total of 150 resort islands and 196 inhabited islands. And one of the things that we face is isolation. Each island, of course there are connections between the islands, but each island is separated from the rest, mostly by deep sea, sometimes by lagoons and by so the isolation is one of the factors that we face when we talk about providing any service into these sort island areas. The other challenge that we face is the small population. When we talk about small population, we are talking about really tiny islands. Okay. Some of these islands actually have less than 50 people living in the island. Okay. And on average, when I took the statistics 5 years back, most of the islands, over 100 islands, have less than 500 people living in the island itself. We have 3 islands or 4 islands now, more than 10,000 people living in. So this is the challenge that we are facing. So 10,000 people living in the islands, only 4, the rest 192 would have less than that, and we have around close to 100 islands with less than 500 people. So imagine the size of the schools, imagine the size of what we have. We are actually providing all the services to all these islands. And the main form of transportation that we have between these islands is by mechanized boats. Okay. For tourists, it's a joy to have a ride on this. It's an experience. But for us locals, when we have to travel day in every day on a mechanized boat, where it takes a lot of time to travel between islands, that makes actually a bit hard. And also, if it is for education, if it is for health services, if we have to travel, then we cannot decide the time of travel, because it's based on when we have to travel. So whether it's rough seas or not, we'd have to travel. But for tourists, they can decide. So that difference is there. So, but of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, airports are coming up. So the form of air transport is on the increase. For country our size, with a population of 146,000 people total, we now have 12 airports, 3 of them international airports, international flights coming in, and so that's a lot of airports coming in, and 5 airports are now actually being built. So we will have, by the end of 2018, actually 17 airports in our country, which would mean actually every atoll would have almost one airport. With all these challenges, we have actually achieved a number of successes. Universal primary education. Every child has access to primary education, and primary education is mandatory. The government makes sure that every student attends a school. There are, of course, sort of resistance coming from different areas, but every child has to attend the primary school. If the child is not attending, then by law, the parents will be actually responsible for that. So we have achieved universal primary education in late 1970s, early 1980s. We started building schools in every island. So achieving that target by 1990, we have achieved universal primary education. And it was not that hard compared to the what we are going to talk about later on, because primary education meant that even for a school with 10 children, you have to have one building and then one teacher would be sufficient. That's the sort of model that we went on. But now we are having all issues with that. But every school, every island actually provides the primary education. Now when it comes to secondary education, the challenges actually keep getting more, because secondary education meant that there were different streams coming in, different subjects coming in, and different competencies from the teachers. However, by 2000 we have achieved universal secondary education as well. Every island now has a secondary school as well, except actually, if I remember correctly, except 2 islands where students have to travel to the nearby island. On low tide, they can even walk. So if it is high tide, they have to take a small dinghy, but they can actually go to the nearby island for their secondary education. But this is a challenge, because I know I keep talking about challenges, but you have to imagine, one of the schools that I visited, from grade 1 to 10 years, there were a total of 40 students. The number of students in the whole school was 40 students, and there were 10 teachers. So every 4 kids had a teacher. So in terms of budget and all that, that was quite a challenge for us. Now, once, as I mentioned, one island, one school is what we go for. The next step, because we have achieved universal secondary education, because we have achieved primary education, people are quite keen on getting their higher education. This is what the next step is for everyone. The problem with this is that now the government policy is that until you are 18 years of age, Ministry of Education actually tracks you, makes sure that you are under some sort of educational institution, whether it's a college or in a high school. So there's a lot of demand for higher education. People actually wants to carry on with degrees, masters, and PhDs. However, when it comes to higher education, it's the populations are more scattered, because we have one student in one island. Out of the 196 islands, you might have actually 1 or 2 students in each island. So reaching them is a huge issue for us. Giving access to them is a huge issue. Access to higher education has been one of our major target areas, one of the major things that we wanted to achieve. Hence, Maldives National University, what we did initially was we built 4 campuses. In addition to the capital, we built 4 campuses in 4 of the islands, one in the north and 3 in the south, and we built dormitories there so that people from other islands can come and actually study there. So dormitories was one of the ways in which we were trying to achieve access. Initially, we succeeded. We actually got quite a number of students coming into the higher education. But now we are facing challenges, because the problem that we are facing is that most of the people who actually want to achieve a higher education, they actually work. They work in their islands. They work and then they study. So working population, they cannot travel to an island, stay there for 3 years, get a degree, and then go back. Okay. So now the other option is we have to reach them. In order to reach them, we actually looked at different types of models, distance education models. This is where actually distance education comes into the whole frame of higher education. We started off with weekend classes where students can travel to the nearby island, get the weekend classes and then go back. But during rough seas, this was not that possible. And the other option was that they have to come for a week and then they actually travel back to their island. And also, I can give you one example of a teacher education degree that I was involved in running as a coordinator. We had one student from one island who was supposed to do teaching practice for three weeks. And our policy states that you cannot do your teaching practice in the school that you are working. You have to be in a different school. That island had only one school where he was teaching. So we had to place him in another island. He was the only teacher teaching Divehi language, this is the Divehi language, for 5 grades. So imagine taking him and putting him in a different island for 3 weeks, where 5 grades of students will not get any education or any classes for 3 weeks. So we had to find different solutions for that. So, which actually would mean we were not able to get supervisors to supervise him teaching in his school. So we have to send people to supervise, which was quite costly. So there are all these logistics issues that we have to face in order to look at this model. So initially we said, okay, you can do your teaching practice there. So we flew in people, they took the boat ride to the island and did the supervision, but we found out that this was too costly for us to do. So now what we do is we provide some sort of a technological model. There are cases where we actually ask the student to video and then send it back to us and we do the supervision. And there are many different models that we have used throughout the last 6-7 years. We started off with print media and then we went into different technologies, different ways of doing it. And this is just showing one of the technologies that we are using. This is actually video conferencing. Video conferencing we have now in 20 different locations in the country, 24 different locations in the country we have video conferencing facilities where actually 17 or 16 of those we can run simultaneously. So we can run simultaneous classes in 16 different locations. But still the students will have to travel to those 16 locations out from the 196 islands. So still there is a travel going on. But technology is one of the things that we have been using. Video technology we use and also we use a lot of internet access. And the reason why we use technology in the Maldives is our technological infrastructure is quite, in terms of access, it's quite high. We have 4G access almost in every island. All islands have 3G access. Most islands will have 4G access, mobile connectivity. Internet, there's a fiber optic throughout the country which actually links all the islands to the fiber optic. So internet access is there. However, the cost is very high. Cost of connectivity is very high, so people tend to take low bandwidth packages, which actually creates problems in terms of using it. The model that we are using now is blended delivery. blended in a more formalized way, where we have now designed that students will have to travel to one of the locations twice every semester. Okay, so every semester they travel twice, and then the rest of their teaching, their connections, their learning, their assessment, everything is done online. We use Moodle as our learning management system. We use Viber for communications. We use, to some extent, we use Facebook, and we use Twitter quite a lot, different faculties. But on a formal basis, we use Moodle and Viber as our main communication channels and centers. So they do actually travel. Still, we are finding it very difficult because most of our students who travel are teachers. And if you ask them to travel on a weekend, they will have to travel on Thursday and go back on Sunday. By the way, our weekend is Friday and Saturday. So they travel on Thursday and then they go on Sunday back to their school, which would mean that they lose 2 days of school for every block that they actually attend to. So that actually creates problems for us. So this is the sort of model that we are now working on. Still, this is work in progress. It's been changing throughout. We have a lot of challenges, and one of the challenges that we face is most of the our population, student population, is working population. Okay. They may be fishermen, they may be working in the tourist resorts, they may be teachers, or they may be the administrators in the islands. In any of these cases, traveling is difficult for them. Their job while working and studying, that puts a lot of pressure on them. So all these are actually challenges. The other is when we actually go for technology-based models, we have to go for a technology that is accessible to the student. From our side, we have high technology, high infrastructure as an institution. For the student, because of the cost, they take low bandwidth packages. So we will have to cater for those low bandwidth. So that's the sort of balance that we are trying to get out of these technological innovations. The other is, of course, we have mobile connections to everyone. And funnily enough, the number of mobile connections is twice the total population. So almost every person has 2 mobile phones. And then, so that's one of the challenges. The other challenge that we are facing with the blended delivery model is we are from, if we talk about Maldives National University, we are a very old institution, old from Maldivian standards, very old. We have a history going back to 1960s, 70s. But these came out as separate institutions with separate cultures, different types of models. So going into technology-based models, faculty find it very difficult to move ahead with the technology. They actually believe that every student has to be taught face to face. But that possibility is not there. So we face that issue. And also the public acceptance of technology-based online and distance is still low compared to face-to-face. There is always the criticism that the quality would be compromised with open and distance learning. So that is an issue. And on top of that, some of the private institutions are offering substandard open and distance learning programs. So that actually fuels the public on the whole thing. So there are a lot of issues in this. And the trust on the technology, people who are technology savvy, they would know that, okay, technology works most of the time, but people who don't like technology, they would always find something when the technology fails. They just wanted to just withdraw from the whole process rather than try again. So the trust on technology is one of the things that we face. And with this model, the other issue we are still facing, we haven't still got a solution, is the examinations. Because we have formal examinations that has to be conducted at the end of every semester. And these formal examinations, in order to conduct these, we have to travel to those islands. And the traveling cost is huge for us. We have online examinations we have not been able to get to yet. And the other thing is getting suitable invigilators, getting suitable superintendents from these small islands, very difficult. It's not that we don't have people there, it's just that if we assign a supervisor, an invigilator or a superintendent, we would find that either that person would be the brother of the student or the wife of the student or the husband of the student. So getting people to do that would be very difficult, because we are talking about 50 people. So it's just one family. So we have to send people to these. And of course, the issue of degree mills still is an issue for us in terms of challenges that we are facing in actually open and distance education, providing all this. However, the recent trend has been to go for virtual classrooms, to go for technology-based models, either using learning management systems. We have private institutions. Actually, only the student would have to come for registration and to get the degrees. The rest of it is all online. I don't know why they have to come for the registration, but they have to come for the registration. It's not online, it's face-to-face. And the degree, they have to come and get it. But otherwise, and there are quite good private initiatives in terms of open and distance learning. However, I must say here that the private colleges, most of them, they tend to stay in the capital, because capital is where the mass is. We have 100,000 people living in the capital. We have only 46,000 people living in the rest of the 195 islands. So the private colleges don't tend to actually move away from the capital. It's either Maldives National University or the other public university who actually goes in. We have one or two colleges who have moved into the islands, especially where there are larger groups of students. So that's the whole challenge that we are facing in terms of providing open and distance learning. The main issue now is not really access, because we have been able to now open it up for anyone, anywhere in the country through the technology-based and blended delivery. However, quality now comes into the picture, because when you're talking about access, you do talk about quality, but once access is there, the next step is how do I make sure that all the quality measures are in place. We have a qualification agency which approves, accredits, and does all the quality assurance measures for the degree accreditation, program accreditation, as well as the institute accreditation. However, this is based on the face-to-face model. When you try to apply the face-to-face model onto open and distance learning, there are huge challenges that they face as well as we face, because one of the things that they actually, the qualification agency, of course I must say that they are working on an open and distance learning qualification approval process, but not yet. So now for a 15 credit module, the student has to attend 56 hours of class or face-to-face contact. When you go for open and distance learning or open delivery, technology-based delivery, how do you get that 56 hours? Some colleges or some institutions, they bring in the students for 2 blocks, and then they keep them for 56 hours in the 2 blocks total. 3 days, 56 hours, how much learning? You question that. But still, MQA requirements are fulfilled. The learning requirements, there are issues. So, what we tend to do is we have talked to the MQA and we said, okay, we will show you through the technology-based learning management system the number of hours that they spend, and then the number of hours that teacher and the student actually communicate, and then if you can, so that sort of agreement we have where that 56 hours, but I don't see really a point of that 56 hours being that crucial. It's learning that is important. So, but the quality aspects of this is something that we will have to think about, especially at a national level as well. I guess the National Qualification Agency is concerned because if they leave this, then there may be other issues creeping in, like people buying the degrees and all that. So, so there has to be that balance that has to come in. So what are our future directions? Well, we actually want to go fully online. However, I don't see that it's feasible in the very near future. So we will have to have some sort of face-to-face contact. That face-to-face contact, how do we provide that? Do we provide that by going into those islands, providing face-to-face, or the students traveling to nearby islands? We have started the process of from campuses now. The last 1-2 years, what we have done is we have had collaborative ventures with either the island councils, the atoll councils, the schools, or Ministry of Education, infrastructures that are in the islands. From the Maldives National University, we make a contract with them where we use their premises, we provide the content, and we also provide the lecturers, and the rest of it is actually managed by the island. So it's a collaborative effort where the community and the university working together to provide higher education in the smaller islands. This is working. Currently, it's working where, but as I mentioned, even if the community is working, even if they are willing to provide us with all the support, when it comes to examinations, still we find it difficult to have the sort of human resources that we need. But I guess with the increase in the number of higher degrees in the islands, we will have more people trained, and then we will have more people to train others as well. Currently, we have, in addition to our 4 campuses, we have 4 different other learning centers offering master's programs. So that's an achievement for us, because once they get trained with masters, then they can train others in the degrees, diplomas, and all that. Saying all that, I will have to conclude saying it's difficult for us to start a program, because our minimum number is 5 students in a class. It's a very low amount. But if I advertise, let's say, 5 different programs or 4 different programs in an atoll. Atoll, we are talking about 20 islands. I will not get 5 people for those 4 programs. So what I tend to do is I advertise only 1 program, so that the whole group comes into one program, and that we are able to get 15 students or so. So these are the sort of challenges that we are working with. But future, actually, in terms of higher education, it looks bright. One of the things that we are working on, we still haven't formalized, is how do mobile learning actually, because everyone has a mobile phone, and it's smartphones, not just the normal phones. Everyone has a smart mobile phone with them, and sometimes I actually question how do actually they get the money to buy all these smartphones, because my students have better phones or latest phones compared to me, but they keep changing their phones very frequently. So why not capitalize on that? Why not actually use those mobile phones and get a technology-based blended delivery model that actually works in the Maldives? And I hope actually I've explained a bit about the Maldives and where we are, and what are the things that we are doing. I know, and I did confess that this is not a high-tech keynote, but rather I'm talking about the sort of challenges that we are facing, and the sort of milestones that we have gone through in the last let's say 7 years of open and distance learning that we have had. So we have come a long way, and there's a long way to go. Thank you very much.